As we get closer and closer to election day and election night, we wanted to show you our map and our road to 270, right? And just a quick reminder, these are the states and how they ended up in 2020. The 7 you see, neither red nor blue, those are the battleground states. And a quick reminder, this is how it ended up in 2020. Biden won 6 of those 7 battleground states. But right now and into Election Day, the polls are getting tighter and tighter. So we wanted to talk to 2 fantastic pollsters about the way they're seeing this race and how it's going to break, possibly. So let's introduce them tonight. First up, political strategist and pollster Frank Luntz joins us. You might know him from the author of the bestseller Words That Work. Also here is Democratic pollster Fernand Amandi. Guys, I thank you both for joining us now. Frank, I'm going to start with you. You've spent decades thinking about words and how they impact campaigns and they move people. Just 2 days ago, you predicted that President Biden's garbage gaffe would cost Kamala Harris the election. Now that President Trump is being hammered over his comments about Liz Cheney, does that change your calculus at all? Or do you think what President Biden did hurt the Harris campaign in a major way?
Well, let's be precise. What I said was that it could have a significant impact on the campaign. And right now, whatever any candidate says is going to affect how those final uncommitted voters, which are very few. The truth is, if you're undecided in this weekend, you're not going to vote because you don't like either candidate. And those who are still persuadable, it only represents 2%. But that's enough to affect Pennsylvania and Michigan, and maybe even Wisconsin. So in the end, you have to give voters a reason to vote for you, not just against you. Some of the language that's come out of the Trump campaign, specifically the presidential candidate himself, is very hard to listen to. It's very divisive and very polarizing. And Biden saying what he did say is very problematic for Harris, because now you don't have the differential. We're clearly too angry with each other, too willing to attack each other personally, too willing to unleash rhetoric that is not appropriate even in 2024. And frankly, I'm more nervous about the future than I am the present. I'm more afraid of how we bring the country together after this election than what's just going to happen over the next 96 hours. They both have to stop. Americans deserve better.
Frank, do you see anything, though, in the numbers that sways you one way or the other? Do you still think it's a complete toss-up?
I'm looking at turnout, right? In fact, I'm just writing a note as I'm speaking to you. What matters now is not the polling, it's the actual turnout. That in reality, if you're 3 points, 4 points ahead, but your voters aren't going to participate, it's irrelevant. So I'm looking at the early voting. I'm also looking at what happened in the registration numbers. And I think it'd be foolish for anyone to declare at this point that they know who's going to be elected president. And the 2 states I'm looking at, one of them is Pennsylvania, obviously, but the other one is Michigan. If either candidate wins both those states, they're going to be the next president.
Yeah, it's a good point. Fernand, I want to bring you in here. Frank just mentioned Pennsylvania. This is where it ended up in 2020. I want to talk to you specifically about sort of this I-222 corridor, right? We have about 600,000 eligible Latinos who can vote in Pennsylvania. A lot of them live in the counties that include Monroe County. They live in places like Northampton County, in places like Lehigh County, Allentown, Bethlehem, Reading, Pennsylvania. We had those comments over the weekend at the Madison Square Garden rally where that comedian said that Puerto Rico was a floating island of garbage in the ocean. How do you think that's going to affect those voters in Pennsylvania?
Well, Tom, it has absolutely galvanized the Puerto Rican community, certainly in Pennsylvania. And, you heard Frank earlier say that words have an impact and they have an effect. You bet your butt they do, especially in this case, because the reaction to the words, I think, is the real story here. Had the words been said, they were bad enough in and of itself when it came to the joke. But what happened is the reaction of folks like Nicky Jam, J-Lo, Bad Bunny, all of these individuals who are icons in the Puerto Rican community, it has set Puerto Rican social media on fire. Spanish language television is also on fire about this subject. So you have brought now something where every Puerto Rican, not just in Pennsylvania, by the way, but in Nevada, in Arizona, to the extent that there's a few thousand Puerto Ricans also in the state of Wisconsin and Michigan. This is now becoming a reflection on whether or not you are going to side with Donald Trump and his folks who made those comments, or if you're going to back Kamala Harris. So I think the Puerto Rican community is just on fire about this. It is having an impact, and that's why you've seen the desperate attempts by the Trump campaign to clean this up, whether it's the comments of Trump himself, Marco Rubio, Rick Scott, and others to try and tamp it down. It's not working so far. And to the extent that there could be an 11th hour incident, I think this is the type of thing that could very well cost Trump the election, simply because in all of these states, and the polling confirms it, the margins are so critically close. If you have an extra 30, 40, 50,000 Puerto Ricans come out that may not have voted otherwise, or maybe had even been thinking Trump and are now all in for Harris, that's your margin of victory in those states, and it could cost Trump the election.
Staying on Pennsylvania now, because it's going to be so critical. You're talking about 19 electoral votes. The Harris campaign is out with their final ad in Pennsylvania, and it's somewhat interesting. I want to play a portion for our viewers, but I want to get your guys' take on it because it's a little different. Let's play it. So this is just B-roll, I'm being told. We don't have the actual audio, but the image that you see here, which is interesting, it's Kamala Harris right side by side with the governor there, Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro, very, very popular in the state of Pennsylvania. Somebody she didn't pick to be her running mate. Frank, when you see that image, is she trying to sort of telegraph an image to Pennsylvanians? I don't want to say it's deceiving, but it almost feels like Shapiro is the running mate, not Tim Walz.
Well, he's the most popular politician in all of Pennsylvania. He's the most popular governor. And frankly, I think she would have been better suited for choosing him as her running mate than the governor of Minnesota. Minnesota's not up for grabs, Pennsylvania is. But I want to say to my colleague, my Democratic colleague, that the point that he's made is a good one. It's a fair one. But if you're agitated and you're part of the Puerto Rican community, imagine how you feel when the current president refers to your supporters as garbage. I agree that the Puerto Rican comment from a comedian was stupid and really resentful. But if that's the case, and you're calling all the supporters of your opponent garbage, if Puerto Rico is going to have that impact, then I wonder what kind of impact Biden's comment, and I know he admitted that it's a gaffe, but I wonder the impact that that's going to have, because Trump is mentioning it in every rally, in every event. And I think that it reminds me of the deplorable comment from Hillary Clinton back in 2016, and we know the impact that that had.
Well, let me just respond to that really quickly by saying I think Frank would be absolutely right, and Donald Trump would be winning this election if his opponent were Joe Biden. Problematically, though, for Donald Trump, his opponent is not Joe Biden, it's Kamala Harris, who, by the way, the day after that comment that was ill-timed and ill-said by President Biden, she immediately said there's no place anywhere in American life for these type of comments. So I think quickly was able to clean that up. By contrast, to this moment, as we speak right now, Donald Trump has not apologized for those comments at that hate rally in Madison Square Garden. And you even have Puerto Rican influencers and surrogates saying, hey, Donald, it's too late. You had your chance to clean it up. You let it go because your style is not to apologize. And now you're going to pay the bill when the Puerto Rican community takes out the, quote, trash, which is the meme now that's out there on November 5th election
Guys,
day.
I want to get your take on something here. The closing polling across the battlegrounds, right? Going back to 2020, I want to put this up on the screen for our viewers here. Both 538 and Real Clear Politics polling average overestimated Biden's support in key battlegrounds like Michigan and Wisconsin. We know pollsters have tweaked their methods since 2020. And again, I don't ever want to give too much pressure or too much hate towards pollsters because they have a very tough job and it's not easy to poll these days anymore. But there seems to be a pattern there, right, where Trump voters are sometimes underpolled. Fernand, I'll start with you. Do you think the Trump voter is underpolled this time around? And if that were true, he would be in a much better spot than he was even in 2020.
No, Tom, I don't think that's the case. First off, there's something going on in the polling this time around in this presidential cycle. It wasn't as pronounced in 2020, 4 years ago. We saw signs of it in the 2022 cycle when a lot of folks, including Frank, said there was going to be this massive red wave that never materialized because a lot of the polling was weaponized. Not all of them. There's a lot of good, independent, trustworthy, incredible polls out there. But by contrast, there are a lot of fly-by-night polling operations at your very dubious background, giving these numbers that just are at odds with what the independent polls are saying, showing a Trump lead well beyond the margin of error, well beyond what the independent polls are saying. I think that's influencing the averages in a way that is distorting the reality. By contrast, what we have seen over the last 72 hours, over the last week, there has been movement towards Kamala Harris. And the polls have consistently suggested, whether it's 2, 3, 1, or as many as 4 points, she is leading the race nationally. She seems to be ahead in a couple of the key battleground states, even in the average of the independent credible polls. And to the extent states like North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Georgia, it does seem to be tied there. But right now, I would much rather be in the Harris campaign's position based on the data we're seeing today, Friday night, as opposed to where we were 2 and 3 weeks ago.
Frank, what do you say to that?
She could have won this race in a very simple way by telling voters in the town halls and the live appearances when you had voters in front of you what you're going to do in the first hour, in the first day, in the first week, in the first month. She had every opportunity to focus on where she stands and specifically what's she going to do, not what her priorities are, but what she's actually going to get done. And she didn't do it. And she's being punished for that. I feel so blessed that I don't have to defend the polling industry. That I don't have to defend any kind of partisanship, because it's one of the things I've really come to resent right now, that people will give you a line and you can tell exactly who they're working for and exactly who they support. And a pollster should not be clear about that. A pollster should speak the data and speak the truth, because the American people deserve that. And the problem is that's not happening right now, and I think the industry is going to get a black eye once again after Tuesday for getting it wrong.
All right, we're going to have to see. I want to talk about one more state before we let you guys go, the state of Nevada here, because we do have some early voting and some stats out of Nevada. This is the way it ended up in 2020. You can see, obviously, Joe Biden won that state. Fernand, right now, Nevada has the highest unemployment in the entire country, right? It is over 5% in Nevada. We've seen those early vote numbers. Do Democrats have to be worried with sort of the breakdown of the early vote, because Republicans are showing up to vote earlier in larger quantities than they did 4 years ago?
Tom, I think they do. Nevada is one of those states where if you're a Democrat right now looking at it, you have to be concerned, not just because of the strong Republican performance in early vote, but especially where they're coming from. They're coming from a lot of rural areas, and I think that's supercharging and turbo-powering why that Republican advantage looks to be significant now. And a lot of Nevada watchers are thinking about this. The one fallback, though, that I think you got to feel a little bit better about if you are a Democrat, by contrast, is the Reid machine that has now outlived even Harry Reid is still very much in play, and that was always going to be an election day turnout operation. These races in Nevada are never decided by more than a percentage point or two, sometimes by as few as 10, 20, 30,000 votes. So if the Democrats can focus and target where they have a much stronger get-out-the-vote operation than Trump does in the state of Nevada, that's where I think they can cut into this early vote lead that the Republicans clearly have right now in Nevada.
Frank, last question here. Could this come down to Nevada and 6 electoral votes?
Yes, and I'll throw something in out of fairness too, which is Wisconsin, which has been considered a swing state that is too close to call. I think that Harris has the advantage there, and that Republicans should be nervous about their turnout operation, because Democrats, the vote does seem to be moving. So you got some of these states that are beginning to settle themselves. Any one of them could be the swing state. I still believe that Michigan, because we don't know what the turnout's going to be there at all, those 100,000 Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, are very angry with both candidates, and some people may not vote. And that is going to be critical. And so Pennsylvania and Michigan are going to be the decider. And I don't think we're going to know Tuesday night or Wednesday night or even Thursday night. I think that this election is going to take several days to determine. And let's make sure that everyone is peaceful and patient so they can do this count accurately. And once again, Americans can trust their election results.
Frank Luntz,